Ricardo says, hey, Grant, it's funny how people are hating so hard on your take on trading Kittle. I hate to say, but you got me used to that scenario months ago. All right, I've been asking all my guests this week, what do you think on the possibility? I mean, it's not going to happen. What do you think of my idea of the 49ers trading George Kittle this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of said something about that on the pod, and not to the extent of, I just want to trade George Kittle, because that's how people. But Croc wants to trade George Kittle. Those are some of the tweets that followed. Not to the how yours kind of blew up. Not to
snowball.
Some people said it, and I'm like, nah. Like, I feel like for different reasons though. I do feel like he's kind of underutilized as a if you want somebody that just blocks very well and you target a couple times a game, then why pay him $15 million a year to get someone that does that? Now, someone smarter than me to say, well, Croc, he takes on double teams and they freeze up things for everybody else. And maybe that's the case, but I just know me in general, I think he's a very special tight end. I think he does a lot of things extremely well. I think he's the leader, the face of the team. You don't want to move him, but I could see a scenario where you could justify it because of the lack of usage. I mean, in the last game against the Rams, what he catch 2 passes? Like, I think it's ridiculous that Kittle is not targeted more, that he's not utilized more in the red zone, things like that. Now, on the other side of things, obviously the contract, he's getting older. He's hurt a lot. If you look at some of the people, the fans from other opposing teams, I think it was the New York Giants. My guy Peacock suggested a trade of George Kittle to like the Giants or their host ass. And a lot of them were like, nah, he's hurt too much.
Thank you.
And that was kind of shocking to hear that, because I don't view it that way.
That's not the perception.
I don't view it that way. I think he's a great player, but that was kind of some of their fans' take.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, perception is reality, and I don't think Niner fans have thought about it. But if I still think Kittle has high trade value, but if he has another season where he's underutilized, plays through injuries, misses a few games, then the national perception is going to be what your friend from New York said. I mean, it's going to be that. He's almost 30s. He's been hurt 3 years in a row. He's really expensive. I don't know. So I think, look, if you don't trade him this year, is a possibility you won't be able to trade him anymore. And this is the last year. But at the same time,
there's a possibility some trade him big cap hit, though, right?
Yeah,
so you'd have cap hit.
Big one. So you'd have to wait till after June 1 and then probably trade him for another player, as opposed to, you're not going to be getting cap space. You're going to be trading him for another player, another position to need, and you got to figure out if you can find that player. I suggested Xavier Howard. What do you think?
I've had a lot of conversations with my brother and my friends in group chats and stuff like that about George Kittle, because I think he could arguably, when he's on, he's the best tight end in the league. But my conversation with him is, dude, we don't throw to him. Like, he doesn't get the targets that these other guys. I mean, he was close to 1,000 yards this year. Obviously, we've seen what he's done in previous years, but he doesn't get utilized like a Kelsey and things like that. So, you talk about him potentially having like a bounce back year, which I don't think he had a bad year, but I could see him go somewhere else and be a 1,400 yard pass catching tight end just because they utilize him in different ways that Kyle Shanahan doesn't. And, I don't think, obviously I think Kyle's great, but you got to walk on, you got to tread water lightly with some of the fans and how they'll take some of these comments out of context. But I don't think they utilize him to his full potential on a consistent basis.
I agree. And the thing is, when they gave him that huge record-setting contract, it was on the heels of them using him in like a crazy. I mean, if you go back to 2018, he got 26.2% of the targets on the team, 26. Right. And then in 2019, it was 20. And then in 2020, when he got hurt, 11. And this last year was 16. I think when you're paying a tight end $16 million a year, the reason you did that is you thought he's going to be getting 1-4 targets. Our whole offense is going to go through him, and it doesn't anymore. It goes through Debo. Debo got 20% of the targets last year. He honestly should get more. He should get 25% of it. He's the best wide receiver in the league. That's what Cooper Kupp gets in LA. So yeah, I just don't see how the Niners can really give Kittle the usage that he would need to justify that gigantic contract.
My friends call him an offensive tackle. So like then they could be trolling, but
he's 245 pounds. Anyway, thank you for your honest answer. I appreciate it. Milf Hunter says Lombardi says Jimmy has injury guarantee for $7.5 million that kicked in after making the NFC Championship game. Can't cut him, must trade him instead. Yeah, I guess from the Niners' perspective, if they cut him, they're just handing him $7.5 million. Better to trade him for a 10th round pick in 2079.
Okay, so I heard someone break this down, and yes, they could cut him, and they would have to pay him $7.5. But if someone else signs him, then they take on that guaranteed. Now, say someone comes in and they sign him for 1 year, $5 million, then the 49ers would be on the hook for $2.5 million that they'd have to pay to him.
Daniel says, hey, Hey, Grant and Croc, can you explain the nuance differences between outside corner and nickel? Why is it so hard for an inside guy to move inside and vice versa? Croc, take it away.
Oh man, okay. So I think a lot of it has to do with like the ability to run with vertical routes. If you can run with vertical routes, you can pretty much play on the outside. In the
And if you
slot,
can
though,
run with vertical routes, you can play wide receiver on the outside. It goes both ways.
right, exactly. Now, as far as being like a nickel, it's challenging because your change of direction has to be much better. There's a lot of space. When you're there, guys have a two-way go,
Right.
and you are more involved in the run game, and you are more involved in the communication between the outside guys and linebackers because of coverage and understanding spacing and things like that. So I think just from a pure man perspective, it's harder just because, when you're on the outside, the sideline is a 12th man. He's a 12th defender. Yeah. When you're in the nickel, you don't have that. And there's so much space this way, so much space that way. Got to play more honest. You got to be more quick twitch with your foot and change of direction.
It's almost like
that's just kind of a broad overview perspective of it.
It seems like kind of different skill sets, and that would explain why it's kind of rare to see people excel at both.
Yeah, and then that's why you don't see guys like, a Richard Sherman play in the slot like that. That his change of direction, that doesn't match his skill set and what he is. He's a pure outside type guy. Whereas maybe like a Cohn Williams, who is terrific in short areas, doesn't really have the long speed to run vertical. I think ideally you would like to have somebody that has the quick feet, change of direction, and also the ability to run well with vertically pushing routes.
And that guy is a top 10 pick if he's ever coming out in the draft. That guy
or like a Chris Harris Jr., a guy who kind of mastered that, who started, he played in base situations, play on the outside, and then in nickel situations, they bring him in the nickel and bring in Bradley Roby to play the outside corner.
Carlos Rogers 10 years ago.
Right. Which that was an interesting inside guy. Kind of got ate up by Victor Cruz. I'll never forget that. Goodness gracious.
Victor Cruz wrote about it in his book.
Did he?
Yes. I like Carlos Rogers. He used to talk once a week in his locker room, and he would always have like an Adidas sweatsuit on. He looked real fresh. He was always nice, always smiling.